Rebellion of the Damned. Section. Burning Fields and Poisoned Wells. Quote, "And ye shall be freed from slavery, and so shall be free in everything. And the last of your oppressors shall be dead." End quote. From Charles Leland, Aradia, The Gospel of Witches. Of the many crimes attributed to witches, crop destruction and unexplained sickness or death were the most common. Much of this can be attributed to natural causes, with, quote, witches providing an easy scapegoat for the superstitiously minded. But it's not outside of the realm of possibilities to suggest that sabotage and poison, the age-old weapons of vengeance for the disempowered, were also employed on occasion. The French countryside has a long tradition of peasant revolt that has manifested itself in both open protests. There were literally hundreds of uprisings, from isolated food riots to major rebellions during this period, and conspiratorial resistance. Various means of, quote, agrarian terrorism were used against exploitative landowners, with cattle maiming and crop burning being some of the more popular tactics of the time. In fact, the word sabotage itself has French origins, and literally means, quote, to clatter with sabots, wooden shoes, referring to peasants' trampling of crops as a form of protest. Fields and vineyards were set ablaze from time to time, the arson often claimed to be the work of a witch. According to popular superstition, the devil's agents also had the ability to, quote, destroy the fruits of the fields with unusual thunder, lightning, showers, hail, storm winds, frost, flooding, mice, worms, and many other things, causing them to rot in the fields. Or else, quote, witches filled the skin of a cat with assorted vegetable matter, put it in a spring for a period of 3 days, and then to dry and grind the mixture. On a windy day, they go up to a mountain and scatter the powder across the land as a sacrifice to the devil, who, in return for their offering, will destroy the crops. End quote. Lye or salt could also have been sown into the soil directly. Conspiracies involving poison or the spreading of disease were very much in the public mind during this period. Like the Jews before them, witches were often accused of poisoning wells to spread sickness and death in Christian communities. This was obviously recycled slander used by church authorities against earlier perceived threats. All the more effective in a fearful age where plague epidemic was still a recent memory. But that doesn't rule out the use of poisons entirely. It was said that the devil advised witches in the production and use of poussée, a diabolical substance used to sicken or kill animals and people. The recipe could contain any number of bizarre ingredients, depending on who was tortured into confessing to its manufacture. It's probably safe to say that toad saliva or the rendered flesh of an unbaptized infant wouldn't add much to the potency or effectiveness of these potions and powders. But arsenic would. Arsenic was readily available and, administered in large doses, would produce symptoms that resembled those of cholera, dysentery, or plague: fever, diarrhea, vomiting, convulsions, delirium, coma, and eventually result in death. Additionally, the witch's arsenal could include a variety of other herbal toxins obtained from, quote, the devil's garden. Hemlock, which caused paralysis of various body systems. belladonna and mandrake root could inflict delirium and hallucinations. Henbane could induce drowsiness, and in large doses, coma. And aconite, aka wolf's bane, quote, applied to a wounded finger could affect the whole system, not only causing pain in the limbs, but a sense of suffocation and syncope. End quote. Many of these symptoms correspond with the acts of maleficia reported to have stricken humans and livestock. In the Compendium Maleficarum, an Italian witch hunter's manual written in 1608, it's claimed that, quote, the sickness with which the bewitched suffer are most often a wasting or emaciation of the whole body, and loss of strength, with a deep languor, dullness of the mind, various melancholy ravings, different kinds of fever, convulsive movements like an epileptic, a sort of rigidity of the limbs, sometimes the whole head swells, or such a lassitude pervades the whole body that they can hardly move at all. Some lose their appetite, and some vomit their food, and are so upset in the stomach that they are often constricted in pain. End quote. The French-speaking border region of Switzerland was shaken by a plague panic throughout the mid-16th century. Witches were accused of conspiring to anoint doors and windows of various homes with a, quote, grease made from plague-infected matter. During a witch trial that took place outside of Neuchâtel in 1583, 2 women confessed to having been provided with herbs by the devil, quote, to make a grease to rub on windows and doors, so that people would die when they touched it. End quote. In 1590, the French demonologist Jean Baudin reported a confession made by a suspected witch who claimed to have buried a jar containing a toad, a consecrated host, and various magical powders, quote, beneath the doorway of a sheepfold while uttering some words, in order to make the flock die. And in the province of Berry, in central France, it was said that witches wore the skins of wolves or wild boars, and roamed the countryside, poisoning cattle. The most famous and well-documented diabolical poisoning conspiracy was the L'Affaire de Poison, the Affair of Poisons, a major murder scandal that took place in Paris between 1677 to 1682, during the reign of King Louis XIV. Catherine de Say, aka La Voisin, a practicing sorceress from a peasant background, was at the center of a, quote, criminal magical underworld that operated in Paris and Versailles at the time. La Voisin's services, which ranged from abortions to love magic to poisons known as, quote, inheritance powders, were sought out by influential members of the French aristocracy. Her most important client was Madame de Montespan, the official royal mistress to the king. Black masses and other services were provided for Montespan in order to maintain her social position and eliminate competing foes within the king's court. Eventually, King Louis XIV himself became the planned victim for poisoning when the Madame fell out of favor with him. La Voisin, along with 35 accomplices, were tried and executed for the crimes of witchcraft and attempted regicide. She was publicly burned on the Place de Grève in Paris in 1680. End section.